Here is my lovely Yamaha MT-09 that I bought just over 6 months ago. And I have to start this report with an apology about not having posted an update for a good few months. A lot of traveling, a lot of personal stuff to deal with, and a lot of just riding it short distances to pick up other test bikes mean that I haven't really clocked up much in the way of mileage. In fact, it is sitting at just under 5,000 kilometers, and I think it was at nearly 3,500 k's the last time I reported on it, all the way back in August or September, I think it was. Okay, so why bother now? Well, I want to go back to the subject of tyres and make an embarrassing admission. I think I was very wrong about the Bridgestone S22s. You may remember that I wasn't overly impressed with these things, the S22s, whinging about how long they seemed to take to warm up and ultimately how much grip they offered, in particular on the rear. I ended up chasing my own tail down a rabbit hole to nowhere really, messing with tyre pressures, eventually getting to a cold pressure on the rear as low as 1.8 bar before I ended up returning to about 2.3, 2.4 bar before the tyre was actually finished. And it was definitely better at that sort of slightly higher pressure, but it was also totally finished within 2,500 kilometers, which is obviously ridiculously quickly, but that's undoubtedly my own fault. I am an idiot. Those way too low pressures and plenty of clutched up second gear wheelies meant I very rapidly destroyed the life of the tyre right down the centre of the tread. I would expect, even with, let's call it spirited riding, to get triple that in terms of life out of a sport tyre like this. I ultimately ended up changing the tyre just after 3,000 kilometres because I'm cheap and I was a bit skint as well. Okay. So my only saving grace is that while doing all this moaning, I was also trying to get a setting on this rear shock that gave me some sort of consistent ability to deal with bumps, big ones, but especially those small and repetitive ones. The sort of undulations that get the rear end skipping around while leant over, making the bike feel very unsettled in the process. I did, thankfully, during this process say that I wouldn't completely condemn the tyres, because the more I played with the shock, the more I realised it might actually be, well, quite rubbish. And in fact, it might be the guilty party rather than the tyre. Subsequently, with more fiddling and a lot of swearing and occasional feelings of despair, I have to admit, I've come to the inescapable conclusion that the rear shock is, in fact, a complete turd of a thing. The one really clear sign of cost cutting on this undeniable bargain of a bike, and it should probably immediately go in the bin. I apologise unreservedly to Bridgestone. I mistakenly and prematurely was unkind to your S22. Please forgive me. What really made my mind up was when I experienced the same tyres on KTM's Super Duke Evo recently, and they were great, grippy, lots of lovely feedback. They gripped early in a ride, even in the cooler temperatures I was experiencing back in France, and yeah, it's just a lovely sport tyre for the road, no question about it at all. Which leaves me with the rear shock on my Yamaha that I would dearly love to swap. I don't have the money at the moment. What a surprise. But I will try and reach out to a couple of manufacturers and see if any of them will send me some samples to try out. Anyway, back to the tyre. Being skint and of miserly Yorkshire heritage, I decided to ignore all of my own advice and just replace the rear because there was a decent amount of life still left in the front S22. I went to a big accessory store in my local city in France, which is Clermont-Ferrand, the home of Michelin, or Michelin if you're actually from Claremore. Anyway, I fitted another Bridgestone, this time a more sensible tyre, in the hope of getting considerably extended tyre life out of it. The T31 may be a more touring oriented tyre, but I've ridden it in the past, admittedly on bigger, heavier touring bikes, but I was happy with the grip it offered. Enough grip, in fact, for some occasional madness, or at least that's what I'm hoping. Although, to be fair, until I get the rear shock sorted, that madness won't really be all that mad. After a couple of 100 kilometres, I can report that given my, as yet, relatively limited buffoonery levels, it has performed adequately, and, well, all is well. Sort of. In isolation, because although I decided to stay with a Bridgestone, the same make as on the front, in a forlorn, futile hope that it might mitigate the problems I was anticipating, it hasn't. At all. When it's got new tyres, this is a really sweet steering machine. But now, it's horrible. It only feels like the front and rear of the bike are sort of both loosely connected to the same motorcycle. And when I do lean it, it needs constant input on the inside bar to keep it on line. When you turn in or change direction from lean angle one side to lean angle to the other, it feels like the tyres are making it turn in at different speeds, front and rear. It's like they're almost fighting each other. Even on a truly wonderful road like this, it's bad enough to make me just, I don't know, just ride back to the van and load it on the trailer. It's really, really pissing me off. I'm an idiot. But I'm not going to do that. In a couple of hours, this bike is booked into a Yamaha dealer here in Calpe on the Spanish coast, and he is going to put on a matching T31 front tyre. I'm pretty sure all these handling woes will then completely disappear. Yes, I know I ignored all my own advice about never mismatching tyres, even from the same brand, but it's a bit like gambling and self-delusion. If circumstances force a less than ideal situation on you, you roll with it and hope for the best. You try and convince yourself that this one time you'll get lucky and the worn sporting front tyre will magically suit the new touring tyre that you've just put on the rear. Except that's just wishful thinking, and no matter how much you try and ignore it, the result is actually so bad it's borderline dangerous. And anyway, it makes riding a seriously unpleasant and stressful experience. Basically, among other things, I think it boils down to this quite steeply angled front tyre not rolling into a turn in the same way or at the same speed as the much more relaxed kind of profile on the rear, and so both ends are trying to deal with the corners in their own separate and very individual ways. And when they're actually in the turn and should in theory settle down into a chosen lean angle, they're so mismatched that I'm having to add some pretty severe input just to keep the bike on line. So I've scraped together €130 to have the front tyre balanced and fitted. A bit more than I would have paid at the big accessories dealership in France, but I just can't wait to get back there to get it changed. I want to enjoy these roads and share some of the routes I'm coming across, and to do that, I really need to enjoy riding this bike again. Don't go away, I'll be back in just a second in your world. In mine it'll be tomorrow afternoon after I've had a chance to ride with the new front tyre. God knows what I'll do if it still handles like a drunk dancing in an earthquake. Welcome back, and welcome to a much happier, smilier, more contented person than the guy who was talking to you just a few moments ago, who was a a bit of a grumpy old Grinch, I have to admit. The new Bridgestone is on the front, and the bike is now flowing and cornering and generally behaving like the sweet handling motorbike that I bought earlier this year. Oh, I'm in love with my Yamaha again. May I just reinforce the simple but unavoidable truth: never ever fit different tyres front and rear, even if they're from the same manufacturer. Yes, by all means, fit a new rear sport tyre that was the same as the one that you've just worn out, the same model as is still on the front, but do not cause yourself the grief of mismatching tyres in the forlorn hope that it'll save you money without actually spoiling your ride. It is not possible. Your bike will feel terrible. You will eventually end up matching the tyres anyway, and you will have wasted valuable riding time in the process. And you'll feel stupid, like I did. Right, this T31 front tyre feels good. It has a layered compound that means there's grippier rubber on the edges than down the centre. I'm hoping that this means I'll have total confidence again in the front end of my MT. So far, I have to admit, so good in that respect. Ask any experienced rider or racer and they'll tell you it's nice to have loads of lovely grip at the rear of the bike, but really, ultimately, for you to go fast, for you to enjoy your bike and to trust in it, to believe in it, it's much more important for you to have total and utter confidence in your grip levels at the front of the bike. And that about, at long last, wraps up this MT-09 update. I just want to finish by responding to a few of the comments I received when I shared a moment of idiocy from a few months ago regarding when I damaged the front mudguard, which I did by moving the bike when I still had the disc lock fitted. It was only at gentle bike pushing pace, but it was enough to snap a bit of the front mudguard off, which thankfully superglued back on easily, if a little scruffily. I should have had this little gizmo fitted, some of you said, so I wouldn't have forgotten about the lock, but you won't believe this. I actually had it here around the brake lever, but you know, somehow I managed to ignore that reminder, lost in my morning haze. Yeah, so no excuses, it was there the whole time. Anyway, having done it the once, I discarded this thing because I'm not stupid. Not that stupid. I mean, if I've done it once, I'm not doing it again, am I? Or am I? Yes, I am. I did it again. Thankfully, it snapped in exactly the same place on the mudguard. So some more super glue and a cleaner, better job this time, and it looks as good as new-ish. Yeah, I haven't put the disc lock back on since then, and I'll probably never use it again, to be honest. I used two great ruddy chains on the thing anyway, and a couple of motion sensing alarms, and it's chained to the van and to the trailer, so yeah. I have no words to describe this level of stupidity, but something tells me that some of you commenters will find something suitable to say. And on that note of shameful age-related early onset of dementia, keep watching because I'm finally getting around to filming some roads, including an excellent, challenging, exhilarating and occasionally dangerous loop around where I am now, just inland from Calp in the Alicante region of Spain. So cheers for now. Oh, give us a thumbs up, and since it's Christmas, maybe even subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.